BSIS. So this is going to be unashamedly screening. So sorry about that if you don't read screening mammograms. However, there's probably some biscuits left downstairs if you want to sneak out. This is about how to use BSIS, which is basically FRQA on speed, so that you can get even better at doing what you do. I am an unashamed NBSS enthusiast. There you are, I've said it. So if you don't like NBSS, then you may struggle with this, but BSIS is slightly more friendly. It's the nicer, cuddlier sister that you can, it's going to be fine. Don't worry, come with me. So we're going to start here. This is the Western Electric factory, and between 1924 and 1932, the unlikely named Elton Mayo, very bizarre, did a series of studies in Cicero, Illinois, asking himself, how could we get people who put widgets into bits in Bell telephones to work a little bit better? So they tried lifting the light levels a little bit and lowering the light levels a little bit, just to see if they could work out if there was some way that more widgets got done to a higher standard. And actually, what was noticed a little while afterwards by, let's look down and find his name, Henry A. Landsberger. What a strange name. I mean, it's a shame, since he's an American, that it wasn't Henry A. Landsberg II, isn't it? Because that would be still, but anyway, there's probably one now. So he said, actually, what was going on wasn't the lighting levels, because when they stopped observing it, efficiency immediately went back down. It was the fact that they know that they're being watched that changed their performance. And I know that's how some people feel about NBSS and BSIS, this idea that you're being watched in a sinister way. You feel it's a bit like this, that actually the idea is that if we weren't watching you, you would collapse, comatose into your keyboards. But being watched, you're going to be super diligent and keep it up, just in case Big Brother gets you. Well, that's not what it's about, okay? So this observation effect that was noticed is not what it's about at all. I think it's about the fact that what BSIS gives you is the ability to analyze where you're different. And different isn't always good. If you've got areas where you could improve, that's useful to know. But I would point out that knowing where you're good is actually really useful. It means you need to be a bit braver about telling people that you're good about things. Don't be shy, in other words, if you're a really good reader, and make sure that the dominant voice in the department isn't just the person with the slightly larger-than-life personality, but it's the person who can actually read well, okay? So, because that's the best outcome that we can possibly have for the women who come for breast screening, is to make sure we know who knows what and who doesn't, and what their weaknesses and strengths are. FRQA, however, didn't really help me that much. So that's actually a picture that I took of my desk when I was working out trends in my performance over a few years with FRQA. Those of you who know will know that FRQA can do a batch of time. You can specify exactly how long that batch of time is, 1 year, 3 years, 6 months, whatever you like. But you need quite a lot of them piled up together to create a graph to get to the point where you understand whether actually what's happening over a long time is you're getting better or worse. KC62 is really helpful because it shows your unit's performance. But what it doesn't do is talk about unit performance everywhere else. It talks about guidelines or targets, and that's rather different. For example, the prevalent reading target is not obtained by every unit in the country, and the incident reading target for recall rate always is. So one target, I would put it to you, is not very well set, to be honest, and hasn't changed, as we heard yesterday, for about 20 years. Okay, so FRQA and KC62 are wonderful examples of really, really great databases with lots of rich information. The trouble is, who really has time to synthesize out all that stuff other than nerdy people like me who quite like doing it just so I could whip out a chart when I was a QA radiologist back in the day and everyone go, "Cool, Jim, how'd you do that?" So, welcome to BSIS. Well, it starts unpromisingly in something called OpenExeter, which appears to have nothing to do with the price of bread, but hey, never mind. And so this is a page from the web, and it shows you that you're going to log into the system. Now you know my user code. You can try and hack my password. Good luck, because even I can't remember my password. So then once you've done that, you get into this, and I'm just doing this just to show you that. So that thing there is the application, and it comes up by default as breast screening information system. But don't forget that if you click on it, you can change your password, which you need to do. You'll be delighted to hear about every month. So I just put a reminder in your calendar that you're going to do that. And they'll send you an email as well, just in case you didn't have enough of those. But that's how you change your password. It's hidden in there. It's hard to find. Okay, so then you get to this, and then you go through and you get to this, and then you get to this. Now, this is not overwhelmingly intuitive, in my opinion. So I'm going to try and help you navigate your way through that to find all the goodies in the Sweet Shop. Okay, so you've got Film Reader at service level on the top, and you've got a bunch of little icons, and Film Reading data loaded, don't worry, that's just the Office Manager, it's not you. Okay, so please note that hidden away at the top, I almost went past it myself just then, is this. Further information, click here. That is a 32-page PDF, which has been written to help you interpret what follows. So if you're falling asleep or you find my talk really irritating, there's always the PDF, which I regret to say partly I wrote, but hey, you can't win them all. Okay, so moving on. This is how I look upon it. You've got this film reading summary, the film reading control chart, and the film reader information in your report list. You've got all those things, and then you've got a first versus second. I've grayed that out because I think it's obvious what that is, but the others are this. The film reading summary allows you to see trends. At the moment, it's only 3-year trends. That might be changing. You can choose what interval you look at, so actually you could put it together to kind of get a 6-year trend. So film reading summary at the top there, really useful for trends. The film reading control chart is very useful for seeing how you compare with other people in your department. Wonderful for that. So you can get an understanding of that. And do you know what? Not just in your department, but in the whole of the UK now. You can see it on those charts. Film reading information, or film reader information, should really be called quadrant charts. Those are those charts with where you're in one of 4 segments, and that's my favourite bit. And then the first versus second. So let's go through those. When you go on to the first one, you start uninspiringly at a chart, a table, which is rather like FRQA. But fear not, if you can find this bit, which says 1 of 2 question mark, always uninspiring, isn't it, to think it doesn't even know how many pages there are. It does, really. It's okay. It's just a quirk of the software. If you click on the right arrow there, it takes you to a graph. Here's a mock-up of the graph so you can see it a little bit better. This is a graph for Hopeless Heights. And I ought to say right now that Hopeless Heights does not exist as a trust, and all of the data that I'm presenting is fake. Okay, so don't worry about it being you. So 254, that reader on the left, got 3 colours of the chart. These are the same colours as you'll see in BSIS, and it shows 3 different years, and you can see that the recall rate, which is the y-axis, the bars are going down. So over the years, they're managing to control their recall rate, and that's great. I'd say that recall rate is one of the statistics that you can hang your hat on, in that you read enough films and you recall enough that this is a relatively stable statistic. But there are a lot more unstable statistics, which we'll come back to later on. 308 started with a problem and then made it worse. So 308 knows something's got to give because stuff's changing. That's the next one along, where the recall rate is going up. The dotted white line that I've drawn along somewhere between 4 and 6 is actually the national average. And right over on the right is the whole of the nation's recall rate. Now you're probably thinking, do I mean prevalent or incident? And my answer is no. There you are, I've managed to say no. How about that, in the middle of a talk? Yes! So, no, because actually this is an amalgam of your prevalent and your incident reading. It's not... it's just your first reading, but it's an amalgam of your prevalent and incident reading. So the national average is about 5 for that. Next one down, bit low. And actually, it's difficult for me to tell you whether that reader, who's a little bit below the national average, is actually a brilliant reader because they're really selective, or whether they're simply blind. Because you can't actually use these data without knowing what the cancer detection rate is. So one of my pleas to you is when you're using this, try not to just look at one thing, look at both. And throughout it does help you do that a little bit, but bear in mind, just because your low recalling doesn't make you great, you're probably great anyway. 627, I've deliberately drawn that so it fluctuates a lot, to remind me to say that if you're very close to the 1,000 minimum to appear on one of these charts, then there is some statistical instability. Okay. So that's what Film Reader Summary is. Remember, 3-year trends for all of it. So you can see what's changing. See if you're achieving what you set out to do. The next down is the Film Reader Control Chart, otherwise known as funnel plots. This is really you versus the rest. That sounds a bit adversarial, doesn't it? Sorry about this. This is you compared to the rest. That sounds slightly less, I don't know, maybe it's just as miserable. So here we go, here's a funnel plot. It looks a bit like a funnel because it's squashing in towards the right of the screen. What's going on is that as the numbers go up on the x-axis, down there it's the total number of cases that you've read as a first reader. As the numbers go up, you get more statistical stability, and so those bars go in. And those bars are saying, if you lie between those two bars, there's nothing strange or nothing super strange about you as a reader, whereas if you're outside it, there's definitely something odd about you. Okay, so there's a little red dot that's just strayed outside these bars in this fictional data, and let's say that's a Dutch radiologist. You know, they need help. So what they've done is they've got cancer detection rate drop just a little bit off, they've read loads and loads of films, and the questions you'd ask yourself is it possible that they're reading too fast? Are they under too much stress? Is it worth them slowing down? Or are they aware that they're recalling a bit less than they might? Is that what's going on? And could they increase that and improve their cancer detection? Or do they simply need to look at their missed cancers? As you can see, you've got two different readers there who are reading nearly at 10 cancers per 1,000. And 10 cancers per 1,000, incidentally, is pretty much the maximum that you can achieve. Why is that? Because the incidence in the background, as detected by mammography anyway, Roger Blanks tells me, is about 10 per 1,000. So you'll see every now and again that you do better than that, and that's going to be statistical noise. That's just chance that you happened into a few more cancers. Okay. And here, it happens to be a second reader chart, is another funnel plot, but this time we haven't got one, but we've got two funnels, and it's important that you get what's going on here. The reason that the two funnels now don't overlie each other as they did in the last chart is because this unit has something different from the nation. So the national figure is the purple one, and the blue figure is the unit. This means that this unit is slightly different. In this instance, in second reader cancer detection, this unit detects slightly more cancers than the nation. So you can get a flavour for what sort of unit you're in just by looking at these charts and seeing how the funnels lie. Okay, so here we come to the bit that I absolutely adore. I love this bit. This is great. Even if the rest of it doesn't float your boat, I'm pretty sure I can persuade you this will. Okay, so these are the quadrant charts. So we've got cancer detection on the x-axis, and we've got recall rate. No, we haven't. We've got cancer detection on the y-axis. What time is it, Jim? Come on, wake up. And we've got recall rate on the x-axis. And we can see a distribution in this fictional unit going right the way from the bottom to the top. But I've left the distribution as it actually is in the nation, which is by and large, there tends to be a gentle correlation upwards. Well, you'd kind of expect that, wouldn't you? And as Roger Blanks told us yesterday, it does actually level off. So there's this business that you can't actually find anymore, and you've got one person recalling at about 12%, that's 12 per 100, and the cancer detection is, of course, per 1,000. So watch out, because the numbers aren't the same, are they? In other words, there's diminishing returns, and reader, have I got a spot? No, let's not worry about that. So one of those readers has managed to get up to 10 cancers per 1,000 by only recalling slightly less than 7%, the other needed 12%. So perhaps the reader way out over there thought they were doing a really great job, but the truth is, the reader way out there is probably not showing how brilliant they are as a reader, because what's happening is they're finding the cancers at the expense of lots of extra recalls. But it's a quadrant chart. What makes up the quadrants? Why are the black lines there? They are the national average recall rate and the national average cancer detection, which tells you if you move units away from the unit where everybody is blind and you're the best, it may not feel so good. If you end up in the bottom right where your recall rate's quite high and the cancer detection is rather low. Okay, so just be aware of that. It tells you where you'd be in the nation. Fascinating, really. I thought it'd be fun to show you all of the South, and this is every reader in the South region, lots and lots of dots on there, and you can see that in truth, in the real data, it really is the case that people recall from 2%, yes they do, to 14%. Isn't that amazing? Just absolutely astounding. A 7-fold difference in how many they recall. And there's also cancer detection ranging from below 4 per 1,000 right up to 12. And I told you 10 was the most, but there's going to be a bit of statistical noise in there. Okay. So there's a vast range, in other words, of what people actually do. Having BSIS will allow us for the first time to really get a handle on where we sit in all of this and try and get ourselves nearer to that virtuous middle area to be. In fact, heck, why bother with a virtuous middle area? Why don't you just go for the top left, where you'd be great at finding cancers and your recall rate would be dropping down? Okay. So some people struggle with the chart, so I'm going to get all technological with you and go for the highest, most developed presentation you'll have seen so far. This is a piece of paper. I've written on it with a fountain pen, and we can see cancer detection and recall rate and some dots. And I'm just going to go through these quadrants for you in hopefully not over-complex manner. So that is good news. If you're up there, you are what I'm going to call a film reading angel. I love you. I want to hear more from you. I want you to tell me that you're much better than I am because, honestly, disclosure here, I'm not in that quadrant this year, okay? So if you're there, I want to know who you are so I can come to you and ask you for advice. So you can help me not recall the stuff I don't need to recall. So if you are both an angel and crushingly shy, change, please, because I want to hear more from you. Okay. If you are an angel and you already know you're in that quadrant and you're listening to me, you can switch off now because anything I say after this doesn't really matter. This is how you fix it if you're in one of the other quadrants. Here we go. If you're down there, you probably feel fairly miserable because your recall rate is high, you're trying really hard to find cancers, but you just can't get to find as many cancers as you'd like. If you're there, you could do with being more selective. You're getting an above average cancer detection rate, but the truth is that you're doing it at the expense of too many recalls, too many women worrying in that interval between receiving the letter and being told that all is well. And I don't know about you, but they want to hug me or kiss me or say, oh, that's just wonderful, you've done so well, thank you so much. And you're thinking, I've just dragged you back for something that turned out to be complete rubbish, and you think I'm great. It's just, it's sad. Anyway, and down there is something you can directly do. So I've got a little chart saying all you need to do is increase your recall rate, and statistically, it's very likely if you did that a little bit, you'd improve your cancer detection and get more into the norm. So if you're down there and you're doing it because you're just overwhelmed by how many assessment cases that you've got to do, and there's real stress and work, and I've seen that when I was inspecting some units, are down, all the readers are down in that quadrant because what's going on is they're so stressed by the whole thing that they're trying to contain recall so that the assessment clinics are manageable. And that's sad. And if you're all down there, you really need to think again. And because these black lines, bear in mind, if they're not written by my fountain pen, are actually the national averages, if you're all down there, you're going to know using BSIS. Okay. Good. That's just to remind me that if you are in the middle, don't worry. It doesn't matter what quadrant you're in. If you're near the middle, you're normal. It's fine. Okay. So let's go through some. I'm going to try and tell you who these people are, and you're probably going to recognize them, and I'm sorry if you do. So recall rate's high, your cancer detection's high, but let's say your positive predictive value is low. In other words, you're recalling rather too many to get your high recall rate, high cancer detection rate done. I think of these people as this. They are people who are extremely well turned out. They have lovely hoovered cars. Their lives are perfect. When they make cookies, they look like they've come out of the shop. Everything about, well, mine look dreadful, I have to tell you. Everything about them is right. Their teeth are sickeningly straight. They never have dirty hands. They're manicured, they're perfect, but they are also, underneath the surface, actually torturing themselves in some ways, and it's really hard work. So some people in this category are like that. And for them, relinquishing that very high recall rate is super difficult to do. But if you are one of them, I put it to you, aside from that's a lovely jacket you're wearing, I put it to you that the trick to this is to tell yourself that because you're really good at finding cancers, but you also recall too many, you're leaving it to others in your unit to get that recall rate controlled. So you're not showing your true quality. You're hiding it because you've got all those other recalls that people have to weed out through the arbitration process before we get to a sensible level of recall. You've got this. You've got your low recall rate, cancer detection rate's low, PPV is really high. They're very proud of themselves. They don't call back rubbish. They're only going to call back the cancers. They're gung-ho, yeah? So they don't care. They're brilliant. They've been around. They know what matters, and they're fine. But the truth is, they're not finding as many cancers as they might. Then you've got the low cancer detection rates with recall rates that are about average, and things just aren't working out for them. And those people, they're the really, really lucky people in all this because there's just so much they can do to improve. They've got just a myriad of things that they can do to improve. So I'm going to go through some of that. One thing you really need to know about this is that BSIS does not supply instances. So in normal language, that's BSIS does not supply the women or the images that you need to look at to help you. Okay, so FRQA's got them. On FRQA, you can ask FRQA to tell you, with the SX number, the women who are recalled, that you recalled, and that subsequently turned out to be normal. You can ask for the women who've returned to screen by you, you've said no, they're normal, that subsequently turned out to be cancer. You can ask to see the ones that you recalled that were cancer, and you can even see every single cancer in the whole of the unit, all the cancers that the unit found. So FRQA is really, really useful in that respect. And because you can separate it out by first reader and second reader, you can see unadulterated what the truth about you is, unless you're one of those lucky people who does genuine blind second reading, which I wholly approve of. Good on you. I've never been able to resist the temptation to see what the first reader thought. Okay, so if you're one of those really twitchy people, then look at your FRQA instances and look for the recalls that turned out not to be cancer. Those ones are the ones that matter most. It's going to be hard work. There's going to be tons of them. So give yourself a break, only have a month of it, yeah? Compare it to all your cancers and ask yourself, do I really think these ones I recalled look like the cancers I recalled? And if I don't, what's the difference? Is there a high preponderance of small, low-density rounded masses? Ask your upper left colleague, that is one of those angels, to help you as you're going through that if you want to. And for goodness sake, don't dominate conversations because you're so twitched about things, you just can't be quiet. Be quiet and listen to the others, especially the angels. If you're gung-ho, look at your missed cancers because that's where you've got most to learn. So in your instances, you've got less work to do. I'm calling them missed, not discrepant, because do you know what? I'm a call a spade sort of doctor. I'm sorry, I don't mean to depress you, but discrepant if you will. So you're going to look at those. You're going to look at all of the units cancers because there's not going to be enough of them, okay? So your missed cancers, there's not going to be enough to learn very much from, but look at the whole units cancers. You'll learn some more. See what they're calling that you're not. And are there second reader missed cancers? Exclamation marks are laughing at your own jokes, aren't they? I was once told at school. But I've stuck one in there to remind me that that's appalling. So if you're gung-ho enough that a brilliant reader has called back a cancer and you as a second reader have said, no, I really don't think that matters, and you're wrong, then you really need to learn from that. And I've got a few of those in my files. What I suggest you do is that you keep a folder on PAX that's just for you, a private folder, where you put in the stuff that helps you learn. Please do put in the stuff where you've been brilliant and nobody else has. Put in some golden spots as well. Don't know how I'm doing on time because there's no clock and there's no...
Fine. No,
am I okay?
Yeah,
okay. Okay, there's no escape from me just yet, folks. Okay.
12:45 is the end and we're only at... So you can keep going, yeah.
Keep going forever, okay, will do. I can see Fee twitching in the front. She knows me well. She's probably thinking this could be really bad now. Okay, so you can recall a few more. It's okay. Let yourself off the hook and know what it is that you're doing and how much you're underestimating. Allow yourself to recall a few more. It might be helpful, for example, when you're reading, to think about how many in a batch in front of you actually represents a 5% recall rate. So you've got a batch of 20 films, it's going to be about one of them, on average. It's okay. Okay, so the angels, as I've said, don't be shy, and I wish I was one of you this year. That would be really nice. You're just brilliant. So feel good, pat yourself on the back, and make sure other people know how wonderful you are. For the four-leaf clovers, you've got the lot to do. Look at your recalls, look at the unit recalls that you didn't see. Don't dominate conversations. And really importantly, actually, try and know if people are willing to share with you, if there are anyone else in the unit who's in the same pickle that you are, that they're recalling quite a few, but they've not got that much cancer detection, because it's a killer combo to end up with two of you reading at the same time. Now, I know a lot of people say, actually, it's ergonomically impossible to pair readers for optimum combinations. That might be true, but this is one combination I think is well worth knowing about, just personally. So if I'm picking up a batch of films and I was one of these people, I'd be thinking to myself, there's another one like that. I'm not going to double read their films if I can avoid it. Okay, that would really irritate my current director of screening, actually. But anyway, sorry, Karen. Okay, and then bear in mind that there is always 2019, and that's because these data don't stay the same, they alter. You are capable of change, and there are lots of examples in the screening program of how readers change over years. What is the peak age of reading? What's the best age to be a film reader statistically in the screening program? Do you know? Here's a clue. I'm 52. 51. So 51. I'm on the downhill go. So, okay. And if you can't do that, there's always management. That's what I've done. I'm now service line director. So, first versus second behaviour. That's the fourth thing down on that chart right at the beginning. So, here's something that's really interesting, thanks to Louise Wilkinson for these comments. She pointed out that when she was inspecting as a PCA or QA radiologist, that one thing that's fascinating is if as a second reader you recall more than you did as a first, then you are clearly not blind reading, that's the first thing. And secondly, you're dependent on the opinions of the first reader. You're not very confident in what you're doing. Now, sometimes, if your performance as a first reader is really good, and your performance as a second is not so good, so you look different in those charts, it might be worth considering what you're doing to yourself by second reading that way. So it's worth thinking about how you change from one quadrant chart to the other. So if you don't know, have a look at it on BSIS and see. So if you're heavily influenced and it's not helping you, for goodness sake, don't continue to be influenced. So 178 goes from a highish recall rate as a first reader to lower as a second. Let's say their cancer detection is much the same. The implication is that they're calling the wrong sort of stuff, and they're probably doing well to look carefully at what the first reader said and do less harm. The second is more confident in themselves and they're doing about the right stuff. The third is really remarkable. They've got lots more recalls as a second reader. They're being heavily influenced. Now, if that reader happened to have a really good cancer detection as a first reader, it's a dreadful mistake to leave it like that. They need to do something about that. And there are readers out there who do that, who double their recall rates as a second reader because they just can't bear to disagree with the wonderful colleagues that they work with. Okay. Environment. By environment, I didn't really mean air conditioning, but boy, it really works in here, doesn't it? No, I didn't mean that. I meant that I would like you to consider, particularly with reference to your missed cancer rate or your discrepant cancer rate, the fact that the unit that you're in immensely affects that. So imagine for a moment that you're in a really stressed unit that is got a fairly low recall rate, fairly low cancer detection rate, and you've got very few misses. That's hardly a surprise because the second reader is probably rushing through it and not really doing a great job at picking up your failures. What if your personality is such that nobody believes you could possibly be wrong? You're such an ivory tower radiologist that they think, or breast clinician, that they think this person is just so wonderful that I'm not going to disagree with them. What if they hate you and they recall everything that you don't recall, just in the off chance they might finally catch you out so they can go, Jim, no, gotcha. Those things are going to affect what your discrepant rate is, and please bear this in mind. in these statistics, your reads are going to be, let's say, 6,000, okay, a year. And then you're going to divide it into two, to first and second reads. Let's say you've got 2,500, 3,000 in your first reads. Now, what is the national average discrepant rate? It's 0.7 per 1,000. So how many patients are you supposed to miss? 2.1. Well, leave out the 0.1, that sounds painful. 2, women you're expected to get as a discrepant cancer. That means there's heaps and heaps of statistical noise around discrepant cancers. So you should be looking over longer periods, over several years. I'd put it to you that discrepant cancers are important cancers, unless your numbers are really high, to learn from, for seeing specifically what you individually see or don't see in a mammogram, but they're not great to do maths on, okay? So watch out for that. But if you've got a very high discrepant rate and want to lower it really quickly, go to a unit where they walk around with white sticks, because if they're blind in that unit, you are never going to have a discrepant cancer. So there's always going to be a subtle effect, but there are very different units in this country. Depending on where you are, your statistics will be altered by who's around you and what the environment is. Okay, so overinterpretation of miscancer rate I've just kind of covered. It's also true of smallish trends, and that's because there's not a single histogram in the whole of BCIS that has any confidence intervals on it. So it's not showing you statistically how stable that thing is. So watch out if the trend you're looking at is really small. Don't absolutely rely on it. It is true that if you're reasonably close to the centre on that quadrant chart, that's great. They did try and put those ellipses, those dotted lines around, but I gather it's rather complicated to do that. And so in the end, they haven't done that, which is rather a shame. Perhaps it'll come out in the next few years. Okay. So that's it. In summary, I think don't feel afraid of BCIS. Feel free to go in it if you can remember your password, and if you've managed to change it the 12 times it's necessary to change it before you get renewed data to look at it again. Don't think of BCIS in terms of something that's there to beat you up, as in the Hawthorne factory. It's not at all. It's there to help you hone what it is that you're going to do to get even better than you already are. And in the UK, you already are pretty blooming awesome. So well done you. And thank you very much for your attention.